to talk about control panels, and we're going to start with the RK series panel made by Chandler Systems, and we'll go over the installation of that panel, and we'll start at the tank. The first thing that you'll want to do is mount the mounting bracket for the pressure bell. All of the equipment with the CSI panel comes with it, with the exception of a 2-inch male adapter and a piece of 2-inch pipe that you hang the pressure bell on. This will mount, comes with the hardware, and will mount directly to the riser, and the 2-inch pipe that hangs the pressure bell clamps into this area right here. All stainless steel bracket. Drill the holes in your riser, run the bolts through, and then spin your washer and nut on the outside of the riser, and that locks this bracket into place. You want to make sure that you keep the bracket level to the bottom of the tank, and then run your bolt through the riser, or through the bracket and through the riser. And the reason you want to keep this level is because you've got a piece of 2-inch pipe that's going straight down from here, a couple, 3-4 feet depending on riser height, and if it's at an angle, that pressure bell is going to be shooting off into the bottom of your tank at an angle. All stainless steel bracket, bolts to the side of the inside of the riser. What you'll do is take your piece of 2-inch Schedule 40 pipe that your pressure bell is hanging on, and it fits right in this groove here, and then you run the wing bolts down on that and secure it and hold it in place. Of course, that's after you've got it bolted to the riser. Comes with all the hardware you need to install the bracket into the riser, all your bolts, nuts, and washers. Just drill through the riser, run your bolts through and through the riser, and then place your nut on the outside and secure it in place. We'll talk about mounting the pressure bell in the tank. The redundant off and low water alarm for this particular panel is a preset function of this bell that takes place right at the top of this union. So what I have most of my contractors do for ease of installation is run this bell down until it hits the top of your pump, and that'll guarantee you that depth of water, about 3 inches of water over your pump at all times. It can be run lower than that, but then you run the risk of not guaranteeing the submergence of your pump. So what you'll do is take your tubing that comes with the panel. You press the tubing down through the top of the fitting, and it'll go in approximately 1/8 of an inch. Push it down past the grip ring, and it'll go in about another 1/8 of an inch, and that seals it in the bottom. And then once you've got that in there, it's locked in place. To take the tubing back out, hold that ring down flat, and the tubing will be released out of the grip ring. You want to make sure that this tubing is connected at the pressure bell and at the panel before the bell gets submerged in water. If the water level is 2 feet up, that is where the panel thinks that 0 is, and you'll get some false low water alarms and redundant offs. So what you'll do is cut your length of 2-inch Schedule 40 to get this down to that point, run your tubing down through it, spin the male adapter on, and then all your excess tubing will stay at the tank side. Tubing gets pulled back through the J-box and through the conduit with your pump cable back to the panel. And then once you've got this installed at the level you want it, you come up to your bracket and magic marker, mark the top of your pipe at the top of the bracket, so that if you have to pull this out for any reason during installation, you know exactly where it needs to go back down in without having to remeasure. Next, we'll talk about mounting the panel to the wall. The panel comes with all of the hardware you need to mount this. These brackets can be either vertical or horizontal, and it can be mounted to an exterior wall just by running a screw through there. And comes with 4 for all 4 corners. You just take the screw that bracket into it, locks it in, and then run your screw into the stud on the exterior wall to hold the panel in place. Once you've got your panel mounted, conduit can be installed pretty much anywhere in the bottom. There's no knockout in it, so it can be installed anywhere throughout the bottom of the panel. Conduit comes up, lock nut, and then your tubing and your cable from your pump will come up through that conduit. And then again, you've got a bulkhead fitting here that has got the same grip ring as the top of the pressure bell. Push the tubing in, lock it in, and now your connection's made. Now the tubing can be run exterior of the conduit, in which case at the tank you would run the tubing out through a gripper or a cord grip in the side of the riser, and then run the tubing up. Should be protected in conduit coming up out of the ground. It is a direct bury tubing. Should protect it in conduit though coming up out of the ground. And then you can use this bulkhead fitting to go through the bottom of the panel, or again just use it as a coupler and leave it lay in the bottom of your panel box. Once you have your panel installed and your tubing is connected, then the next thing to do is to set your elevations for whatever functions you want to have happen at whatever level. Now again, the redundant off and low water alarm are a preset function of the pressure bell. The only way to adjust your low level alarm and your redundant off is by moving the bell up and down in your tank. You've got a pump off function, pump on function, and your high level alarm. With the screwdriver that's provided in the panel, you make those adjustments just by spinning the screw, the blue screw, to whatever level you want it to be set at. The accuracy is probably plus or minus inch to an inch and a half on these rheostats. You can dial it in and fine tune it by using a multimeter, 200 volt AC, red lead going on the metallic strip on the side of the screw, black lead going on this black screw up here, and it'll tell you exactly where you've got it set on your multimeter. Some of the features of the panel has both control and pump breakers. You can get them with both control, alarm, and pump breakers. Both the alarm and control sides are fused. When the fuse blows, the LED light, little red LED light above the fuse holder turns red. So it's a troubleshooting feature if you lose one leg of either alarm or control side, and that'll be very visual if the fuse is blown. The panel also comes with spare fuses on the back side of the faceplate. The display center will show you what the inches of water in your tank are from bottom of bell. So if you need to know total inches of water existing in the tank, you need to know how far the bottom of the bell is off the bottom of your tank. It's got a programmable alarm, and it also comes in a time dose model where you can set it up to time dose a drain field. You have power lights for both your alarm and control side. Those lights will light up green when you have power to those. It has a pump run light and a manual button. When you push the manual button, the pump run light's on, or if it's dosing at the given time you open up that panel, you'll see that green light on. It has a push to silence and test, so you can test your alarm, make sure your alarm function is working. You can also push that little black button to silence it. It comes with an alarm light on the top, big red beacon, and then your silencing pad is on the side of the panel. Just rub your fingers across that and that will silence the alarm. The panel itself comes with 50 feet of tubing. If you need more than that, you can buy bulk tubing. There are installations where it's been run several hundred feet without affecting the operation of the panel. And the tubing is a very tough, very difficult to kink tubing. Should be the only tubing that you use. Anything that you substitute may kink a little easier than this. And we can get couplers for this. You should have left about 5 to 7 feet in the tank, depending on the depth of your stinger dropping down to your pressure bell, because that bell may need to come out for servicing at some point in the future, and you need to have enough tubing at the tank end of it to be able to pull that out and lay it down and be able to work on it. Okay, now we'll go over the installation of an Orenco MVP panel. And again, start at the tank. First thing you're going to want to do is install your float stack and adjust the float collars according to the design. Typically you're going to have about 2 inches of tether on each float. The float just locks into the bracket with this plastic latch. The float collar is screwed to a piece of 1-inch Schedule 40 pipe with a stainless steel screw. You've got, on this particular setup, you've got a redundant off float, a timer on float, and a high water alarm. In some instances you'll have a timer on float, and between that and your high water alarm have an override timer float, so that if you get to a specific level, it can go into an override time and dose either more frequently or higher doses if you're in a high usage period. The redundant off float, again, will typically guarantee the submergence of a pump. Not in all cases, but that's the reason it's there, is to guarantee the pump has cover all the time. The wiring for each float will go back to your junction box that's mounted inside the riser and sealed. And then the wiring, all of your wire connections are inside this junction box. Your pump cord will also go back to the same junction box, and then all the wires will go back up through the conduit and into your control panel. If you were to envision your float stack like this, you would have a redundant off and low water alarm at 1, timer on at 2, override timer if required at 3, and a high water alarm at 4. Now, in this panel, there is a jumper between 3 and 4. Some designers have you pull that out, some of them don't. If you're using a 4 float stack, when you get into the override timer, your high water alarm will sound because of that jumper. Panel comes with both pump and control breakers. You have a manual off and auto switch. When you flip that down to manual, your motor contactor pulls in, and you can walk away from it until it gets down to the redundant off, and your low water alarm will then sound. If you're in a normal operation, you'll have this in auto, and then once your timer on float gets into the up position, as long as this is in the auto, you'll start in the off cycle. It'll go through whatever was programmed in it for the off cycle, and then run the pump for the amount of time you have in for the on cycle. And then once that drops back down, the panel kind of goes into a rest mode until that float comes back up again. Now, as long as you have your low water alarm up, if that were to drop for some reason, the alarm will sound. Push to silence it. The beacon will stay on until you get back out of an alarm condition, which would be that float coming back up. To mount the panel, it comes with a mounting flange on both top and bottom. Basically, all you're going to do is drill the plastic flange out on top and run your bolts into preferably a stud on an exterior wall to support the panel. You can also mount this on a 4x4 post by putting a sheet of plywood or approved wood on that 4x4 post, and do the same thing. Drill and screw that and mount it to that 4x4 post. To adjust the elevations of the float, there's a stainless steel screw that goes into the piece of 1-inch Schedule 40 that the float collars are hanging on. What you'll do is back that screw out, and then that collar will slide up and down on the 1-inch Schedule 40 to whatever desired level you need that at, and then run your screw back in, and that will secure it. One thing you want to make sure of, if the floats are all fairly close together or have longer tethers, that you offset them like you see here, so that the floats don't get tangled up with each other and create either false pump running or false high or low level alarms. Okay, we'll go over the mounting and programming of the SJ Rhombus programmable timer. Again, we'll start in the tank. Each of the Rhombus floats comes with the mounting hardware, and basically all you do is put the clamp on your float stack, and then the cable from the float weaves through the 2 hooks and goes through the top locking mechanism, and then when you tighten that down on your float stack, that'll lock that cable in place and keep you from having that float slip up or down. And then just run the stainless steel clamp down tight against whatever you're using for a float stack. This will go clear down to, I believe, 1.25 inch and up to 2.5 inch pipe. Float cables come back up, go into the J box along with the pump cable going back to the J box, follow the conduit back into your panel. And then the wiring on this is labeled high water float, timer and override floats, and your low water cutoff. And they are labeled just that way on the diagram in the back. They're also numbered 1 through 4, but they're exactly the opposite of an Orenco panel. If you were to look at your float stack, 1 would be your high water alarm, 2 being your timer override, 3 timer on, and 4 your low water alarm. Mounting hardware on the back of this panel. To mount it to your wall, there's 4 mounts for your mounting bracket. This particular system is a 3-float system. There's no low water alarm or redundant off the way this is set up right now. Your programmable timer is right here. You'll see that the green labeled hand is your off time and the red hand is your on time. And these are programmable. You've got this small screw here that says off. You can set your off time to seconds, minutes, hours, or 10 minutes. And the same with your on time. Right now they're both set at seconds, so we can do this display. If we were to simulate the water coming up in your tank, you'd bring up the bottom float, and then your timer float. And now the pump has come on, and there it's going through the off time, back to the on time, and off. High water alarm, your alarm lights the beacon on the top, and you've got an audible alarm as well, and a silence lever on the side.
Great.
Again, your light will stay on as long as you're in alarm condition. The dial in the center is your on time, or your red hand. That's how you adjust that. And you've got numbered marks along here, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and 12. Again, depending on where you have your adjustment set at, whether that's seconds, minutes, 10 minutes, or hours, is what your timer is going to run. And then to adjust your off time, it's the outside dial, and that moves your green hand around. You have an auto, off, and manual position on your toggle switch. When you pull that down into manual or hand, then your pump will run, and it'll run clear down to your low water. And on this panel, you've got a control fuse and an alarm fuse, single amp. So if you lose the alarm or control leg on it for any reason, you can check that fuse, make sure that's not blown. As with the rest of them, both the Orenco and CSI panels, it has a locking cabinet. It's got a test mode on it, so you can test your alarm, your audible and visual alarm. And then if you're in an alarm condition,